Lex Luger is a legend in the sport of professional wrestling. He's one of those names that you know, even if you aren't a big fan of pro wrestling. He won many championships in his career and even made a big splash by joining WCW and appearing as a mystery man on the first ever Monday Nitro episode. Even with all his success in WCW, he never quite made the breakthrough that he wanted to in the WWF. What went wrong with Lex Luger? Why did he decide to leave the WWF? In the late 80s, Lex Luger would work for World Championship Wrestling, and at the time it was Jim Crockett Promotions under the NWA banner. He would have a short run with the Four Horsemen before feuding with them. He would capture the United States Heavyweight Championship and even win the WCW World Championship. In 1991, Ric Flair had a big dispute with management in WCW and decided to take the WCW Championship with him and leave for the World Wrestling Federation. At the time, they had to vacate the WCW Championship. With the WCW World Heavyweight title now vacant, Barry Windham was declared number 2 contender, and Luger ended up beating Windham in a cage match to capture his first WCW Championship. Eventually, Luger began to have issues with WCW, and the contract he had seemed to have him wrestling less and less while still collecting money. Luger's contract only required him to work a specific number of dates, and having fulfilled all of them, he sat out at the end of 1991 and the beginning of 1992. He would hold the title for 230 days and ended up losing it to Sting at Super Brawl 2. After losing the title to Sting, Luger negotiated a departure from WCW and joined Vince McMahon's World Bodybuilding Federation. I'm sure we'll cover the WBF one day. However, in the simplest terms, it was Vince McMahon running a bodybuilding organization. He regularly appeared as the co-host on its Saturday morning program, WBF Body Stars, and he also made an appearance at WrestleMania 8, taking part in an on-air interview with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. Heenan and Luger would form an alliance in the WBF. He was slated as a guest pose-off at WBF pay-per-view event, but he got injured in a motorcycle accident. By the time he recovered, the WBF was out of business. Luger would then find himself in the World Wrestling Federation. Bobby the Brain Heenan unveiled him as the persona, the Narcissist, at the Royal Rumble 1993. Lex Luger would pose before his matches with a full-length mirror. The WWF also incorporated his motorcycle accident into his gimmick, capitalizing on the fact that he had a metal plate inserted into his forearm. This caused a number of his opponents to demand that he wear a cover-up during his matches when he had a streak of knocking people out. This eventually led to WWE officials demanding that Luger wear an elbow pad, though he'd often remove it during the match. The Narcissist's one major feud was with Mr. Perfect. The feud was based on Bobby the Brain Heenan, his advisor, referring to him as beyond perfection in a slight at Mr. Perfect. Bobby the Brain Heenan formerly managed Mr. Perfect. The rivalry would end at WrestleMania 9, where Luger defeated Mr. Perfect. In early 1992, the WWF's biggest superstar of the 80s left the company, Hulk Hogan. At the time, Vince McMahon thought that Hulk Hogan's time was up. It was time to pass the torch on to someone else. Hogan tried it with Ultimate Warrior, but that didn't really work out. The rumor is that he was supposed to pass the torch on to Bret Hart. However, Hulk never saw Bret as the guy. As you know, we'd later find out that Bret Hart indeed was the guy. Vince and Hogan were at ends, and Hogan left the WWF and took a break from professional wrestling. He would eventually find his way to WCW. Now that Hulk was out of the company, Vince McMahon needed a new All-American hero. If you know anything about Vince McMahon, you should know that he loves America and he loves the pro-USA characters in the WWF. Luger was transformed into a fan-favorite character with the nicknames Made in the USA, the All-American, and the American Original. And on July 4th, he took part in an event where he arrived by helicopter on the deck of the USS Intrepid and body slammed the WWF World Heavyweight Champion, Yokozuna, after a number of athletes, both WWF wrestlers and outside, attempted and failed. Following this, he began the Lex Express Tour, where he traveled the country in a red, white, and blue painted bus to greet fans in preparation for a shot at the WWF World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam 1993. He even made a huge video package to go with it, with the song "I'll Be Your Hero." The plan was to have Lex Luger do media appearances and radio interviews along with autograph sessions to help build the character and hopefully help him connect with the WWF fans. Luger said that he would get up at 5 a.m. on the bus to do appearances, go to the gym, do radio interviews, and it wouldn't end until it got dark. He said he was really tired on this entire trip. At SummerSlam 1993, it would be Lex Luger versus Yokozuna for the WWF Championship. This would be Luger's first shot at the WWF Championship title. After this entire push, you would think that they would pull the trigger and have him be champion. But they didn't. Bruce Pritchard stated on his podcast that Lex Luger was not connecting with the audience. He wasn't a draw for the company at the time. Luger would win the match via countout, but he didn't win the championship. After that, he would be the team captain for the All-Americans at Survivor Series 1993 to get the pinfall victory over Ludwig Borga. Luger then participated in the Royal Rumble 1994 match, where he and Bret Hart were declared co-winners after both men went over the top rope and their feet hit the ground simultaneously. So because of this, both men received title shots for the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 10. Luger was disqualified in his match against Yokozuna, becoming the first man to win a Royal Rumble match and not win the title. Later that night, Bret Hart won the title from Yokozuna. After that, he would have a feud with Mr. Perfect, who was replaced by Crush after Mr. Perfect had an injury. Luger then began a feud with Tatanka for the rest of 1994. Luger then formed the Allied Powers with Davey Boy Smith in early 1995. They did earn a shot at the WWF Tag Team Championships, but they were unsuccessful. Shortly after SummerSlam 1995, Luger, whose contract had expired, left the WWF without letting Vince McMahon know beforehand. He then made his infamous debut in WCW on the debut episode of WCW Monday Nitro. After that, Luger would go on to have a successful career in WCW, but his WWF time never really worked out for him. At face value, you can look back and say Lex Luger wasn't a draw for the WWF at the time, but it does go much deeper than that. If you look at the grand scheme of the WWF throughout history, 1993 might just be the worst year in the history of the entire company. The golden era from the 80s was just ending, and the new generation hadn't taken off yet. Hulk Hogan left the company, and Vince McMahon and the WWF were looking for a quick replacement. They pushed really hard to try and make Lex Luger the next Hulk Hogan, but it just didn't work. Some people will say that Luger was a complete failure in this role as he didn't draw, but the WWF had unfair expectations for him. They were hoping that Luger was going to fit right in the shoes of Hulk Hogan, but in reality, no one was going to. Hulk was a different beast at the time, and trying to make a carbon copy wasn't going to work. Instead of becoming his own thing as a total package that he became in WCW, they tried to slot him in a role that wasn't fit for him. The WWF was trying to keep the cartoony, kid-friendly era that worked in the 80s when the world was changing at the time. They would take a few years to adapt to the cultural shift that was happening in the world. However, Luger fell victim to it at the time. When Lex Luger's contract came up with the WWF, he was working on negotiating a new contract between his attorney and the WWF, but they never came to an agreement. Luger was working in the WWF without a contract when Sting approached him and said they were starting a new TV show called WCW Monday Nitro. Because of this, Luger left the WWF and became the surprise debut on the inaugural episode of Nitro. I don't believe that if Luger would have stayed with the WWF, he would have had the same success that he had in WCW. WCW was really just a better fit for him at the time. the WWF went hard on the Lex Express gimmick with Luger and tried to make him the next Hulk Hogan, but nobody could fill in the shoes that Hulk Hogan had left. And to pin the failure of the company in the time of 1993 on Lex Luger, well, that's just wrong. The 1993 WWF is one of the worst times in the company history, and there are a million other reasons why it wasn't working. WWF was thinking that Lex Luger would be a fix to all of their problems, and he would be the red, white, and blue version of the red and yellow, but that would never be possible at the time. Lex Luger was ultimately caught between the golden era and the new generation.